Imagine getting a late-night call from two aunts you barely know, begging you to drop everything and spend a week with them. Sounds harmless, right? But the moment you arrive at their secluded lake house, every touch lingers too long, every glance burns too deep, and you realize this isn't family. This is something forbidden, and you're already too far in to turn back. Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Jason never thought the night would begin with a call that would change the rhythm of his life. He was sitting in his small Seattle apartment, half listening to the rain tapping against the window, when his phone lit up with a number he hadn't seen in years. It was Aunt Claire. He hesitated before answering. "Jason." Her voice came through warm, familiar, yet strangely fragile. "It's been too long." Before he could respond, another voice slipped onto the line. Aunt Margaret, calm, steady, with that tone that always carried authority. "We were hoping you could do something for us. Not a chore, not a duty, something different." Jason frowned, curiosity sharp now. "What do you mean?" There was a pause long enough that he heard Claire inhale as though gathering courage. "We want you to come spend a week with us, just us. Not as your aunts, not as relatives you owe visits to, as companions, as people who care for you and maybe need you more than you know." The words hit him like a stone in water, rippling through his chest. It was such a strange request. He almost laughed, almost said no, but there was something in their voices, a softness, a longing, that stopped him. "When soon?" Margaret replied. "Tomorrow, if you can." The call ended, leaving Jason staring at the dark screen. His heart was unsettled. He had grown up barely knowing them. Two sisters who lived their own lives in Oregon and Canada. They were names in cards, voices in quick birthday calls, polite smiles across dinner tables. And yet here they were, reaching out as if something important was at stake. By morning, he had packed a bag and was driving north. The highway stretched long, the rain giving way to patches of pale sun. He kept telling himself this was just family, just a visit. But deep down, a voice whispered that it wasn't. The lake house appeared in the afternoon light, hidden among tall pines, its windows glowing amber against the shadows. Claire was waiting at the door, her hair loose, a sweater draped around her shoulders. She rushed to him, hugging him tighter than she ever had before. Her warmth startled him. "You're here," she said, her smile trembling. Margaret appeared behind her, elegant as always, her presence quieter, but heavier. She touched his arm, steady, almost grounding. "Come in, Jason. You must be tired." Inside, the house smelled of lavender candles and fresh bread. The fire in the living room crackled, filling the silence that stretched between them. Claire guided him to the couch, fussing over his coat, pouring tea, her laughter too quick, like she was nervous. Margaret sat across, studying him with thoughtful eyes. As he sipped the tea, Jason realized how strange it felt. They weren't treating him like a nephew. They weren't asking about his job, his mother, his life. Instead, they leaned in, listening to him, urging him to talk about dreams, regrets, moments of loneliness. And they shared two small confessions about how they felt life had passed too quickly, how the world felt colder as the years 47 pressed on. The more they spoke, the more Jason felt the room shifting. It wasn't the chatter of family catching up after years apart. It was deeper, more personal, as though invisible walls had been taken down. Claire's eyes lingered too long on him. Margaret's voice lowered whenever she spoke his name. Firelight made the air seem thick, almost intimate. At one point, Claire leaned closer, her hand brushing against his as she refilled his cup. The touch jolted him, simple yet too warm, too careful to be accidental. Margaret caught the moment, her lips pressing into a knowing line, though she said nothing. Jason excused himself after dinner, retreating to the guest room. He closed the door, leaning back against it, his heart racing. Why did it feel like this? Why did it feel as though he had walked into something unspoken, something fragile and dangerous? He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the way Claire's laughter carried a hidden ache, the way Margaret's eyes never left his face, the way they had both looked at him as though expecting something. It was only the first night, and already he felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting. Their invitation had sounded simple over the phone. But now he understood there was more, something neither of them had said out loud yet. He turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, and the house settled into silence. But Jason couldn't sleep because somewhere deep inside, he already knew this week would not be ordinary. This was only the beginning. The second night in the lake house began with firelight and silence. Jason sat on the couch, a glass of wine in his hand, trying to steady himself. The room was warm, the kind of warmth that made thoughts run slower, but his heart was moving too fast. Claire sat on the rug near the fireplace, her knees tucked under her, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Margaret sat across from him, calm as ever, her back straight, her gaze steady, watching everything. It didn't feel like family. It didn't feel like duty. It felt like something else. Claire broke the silence first. Do you remember the last time we saw you? You were 16. You barely spoke a word to us then. Her laugh was soft, but her eyes didn't leave his face. No, look at you. You're grown, different. We almost don't know you anymore. Jason smiled awkwardly. That was years ago. People change. Margaret leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate. Yes, people change. And sometimes we only notice when it's too late. The way she said it sent a chill through him. She didn't mean it as small talk. She meant something else, something heavier. Claire reached for the bottle and refilled his glass before he could protest. Her fingers brushed his wrist, lingering just long enough to make his chest tighten. She smiled like she hadn't noticed, but Jason knew she had. Every move of hers carried intention. The conversation drifted to old memories, the way the family had drifted apart, the loneliness that came with empty houses and passing years. Claire spoke quickly, her laughter bright but thin, as if she was filling the air so it wouldn't collapse into silence. Margaret spoke rarely, but when she did, her words landed like stones in water, steady ripples spreading outward. At one point, Margaret turned to Jason directly. Tell us, she said, what do you want in life? Not work, not responsibility. What do you really want? The question caught him off guard. He hesitated, staring at the glass in his hand. I don't know, he admitted quietly. Connection. Maybe something that feels real. Neither of them spoke right away. Claire lowered her eyes as though the answer had cut into her. Margaret nodded once, her face unreadable, but her gaze softened. The fire cracked, sending sparks upward. Claire leaned closer, resting her chin on her hand, studying him like he was a mystery she was eager to solve. Margaret stayed still, but the air between them grew charged, thick with words left unsaid. When Claire laughed again, it wasn't light anymore. It carried something deeper. She told him about her life in Portland, how nights felt longer, how she sometimes sat by the window and wished someone would just sit with her in silence. Margaret added her own confession, quiet but raw. She admitted that sometimes she felt invisible, that people only saw her strength but never her loneliness. Jason listened, his chest tightening with each word. These were not the stories of two women sharing family chatter. These were confessions, as if they had been waiting years for someone safe enough to hear them. And somehow they had chosen him. He tried to respond, but his words stumbled. Instead, he reached out without thinking, resting his hand lightly on Margaret's. The touch was brief, meant only as comfort, but the moment stretched. She looked at him, and in her eyes was something he couldn't name. Gratitude, longing, maybe both, Claire noticed. She tilted her head, her smile faint, almost sad, but she said nothing. The night grew later. Claire curled on the couch beside him, her shoulder pressing against his. The closeness, casual yet deliberate. Margaret remained across, her silence heavier now, her eyes watching every shift, every breath. Jason's thoughts tangled. He should have felt out of place, uncomfortable. Instead, he felt drawn in, caught between them. The warmth of Claire against his side, the steadiness of Margaret's gaze. It was too much and not enough at the same time. When the clock struck midnight, he excused himself, his voice unsteady. I think I should sleep. Claire touched his arm, her fingers soft, her eyes holding his a moment too long. Of course, rest well. Margaret only nodded, but her expression carried something unspoken, something that followed him down the hallway to his room. In the quiet of the guest room, Jason sat on the edge of the bed, his hands gripping the sheets. His heart wouldn't slow down. He replayed the evening again and again. Claire's playful nearness, Margaret's steady intensity, the way both had opened their hearts to him in ways that didn't feel like family. He knew this wasn't simple. He knew something was stirring beneath the surface, something that might break him if he wasn't careful. But another truth rose stronger than fear. He didn't want to leave. As the fire in the living room died, Jason lay awake, caught between two women who had been strangers most of his life, but were now pulling him into a world he couldn't turn away from. The week was far from over, and already his heart was tangled. The morning began with silver mist crawling over the lake, the kind of quiet that made the world feel paused. Jason stood at the window, staring out, still restless from a night without sleep. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and for a moment he thought of leaving, packing his bag, driving away, pretending none of this had ever happened. But before the thought could settle, Claire knocked softly and stepped inside without waiting. You're awake, she said with a smile that looked almost too bright. She wore a thick sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Come with us. We're going for a walk. Margaret was already waiting outside, her coat buttoned, her hands in her pockets. She looked different in the morning light, calmer, softer. Her sharpness from the night before replaced with something quiet, almost vulnerable. Without a word, the three of them began down the narrow path that curved along the lake's edge. The water was glassy, holding the reflection of pines and the pale sky. Birds cut across the silence now and then, but mostly it was just their footsteps crunching against the damp ground. Jason walked between them, Claire linking her arm through his as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Her warmth against him was steady, and every now and then she leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture both affectionate and too close. He tried not to look at Margaret, but he could feel her watching. Her steps were slower, her presence heavy behind them, like she carried thoughts too large to say out loud. It was Claire who broke the silence. You know what's funny? When we were younger, Margaret and I used to dream about moments like this. Not with you, of course. You weren't even born yet. But with someone we could feel close to. Someone who would make everything feel less lonely. Jason glanced at her, uncertain how to answer. She smiled, but it wasn't the teasing smile she had worn the night before. It was wistful, almost sad. Margaret's voice came from behind, low and steady. That's why we asked you here, Jason. We didn't want another holiday where everyone smiles at the table and then disappears. We wanted something real, someone to share the silence with, someone who listens. Jason slowed his steps, his heart beating fast. He felt Claire's grip on his arm tighten slightly, as if she was afraid he would pull away. I don't know what you mean, he said, though part of him knew exactly what they meant. Claire stopped walking and turned toward him. The mist wrapped around them, the world suddenly small and private. Her eyes searched his, wide and bright, almost pleading. We mean this, you, us, together, without pretending to be something we're not. The words hit him hard, and before he could respond, Margaret stepped closer. She didn't touch him, but her nearness was enough. Her gaze was steady, her voice soft. We don't want to confuse you, don't want to hurt you. But we've both lived long enough to know that what matters isn't what others expect. It's what makes the heart beat. Jason's throat tightened. His chest felt heavy, like he was carrying something too big for him. He looked at Claire, then Margaret, and the weight of their eyes made it impossible to breathe evenly. Claire smiled faintly, though her voice trembled. Don't you feel it too? This pull between us. He didn't answer, he couldn't. His silence was an answer of its own. They walked again, slower this time, the air thick with unspoken words. Claire kept close, her arm still looped through his, her touch deliberate. Margaret stayed quiet, but Jason felt her presence even stronger now, like her silence carried more than words ever could. When they reached the edge of the dock, Claire let go and sat down, her feet dangling just above the water. I used to come here alone, she whispered. I'd imagined someone sitting beside me. Someone who saw me not as a sister, not as an aunt, not as a name on a holiday card. Just me. Margaret stood behind them, her arms crossed, her eyes on the horizon. And I used to imagine not feeling invisible, she said quietly. But life doesn't hand you what you want. You either reach for it or it slips away. Jason sat beside Claire, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The air felt colder now, the mist wrapping tighter around them. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder, her hair brushing his cheek. Stay with us, she said softly. Stay and don't hide from what's here. Margaret finally sat on his other side, not touching him, but close enough that the heat of her body reached his. She spoke slowly, almost like a vow. We're not asking you to choose. We're asking you to see us, to let yourself be seen. Jason's breath shook. The pull was undeniable. Claire's nearness was playful but aching. Margaret's silence, steady but deep. Together they surrounded him. Not with demands, but with raw honesty. For the first time in years, he felt wanted, not for his role, not for obligation, but for who he was. And yet it terrified him. The mist thickened, the lake stretching endless before them. Jason stared into the water, searching for answers he didn't have. His heart beat against his ribs like it wanted to escape, like it already knew a choice had been made without him realizing it. He should have spoken, should have said something to break the tension. Instead, he sat between them, silent, his body betraying him with every quickened breath, every tremor of his hand. And in that silence, Claire whispered words that sealed the moment. This week isn't about family, it's about us, about what we could be if you let it. Jason closed his eyes, knowing nothing would ever be the same after this. The lake was quiet, but inside him, everything had begun to roar. The evening settled in with a hush, the lake house glowing under the flicker of firelight. Jason sat at the edge of the couch, his fingers tied around a glass of wine he had barely touched. The day's walk haunted him. The mist, Claire's head on his shoulder, Margaret's steady voice. His thoughts tangled in loops impossible to untie. Claire entered the room first, her laughter soft, carrying a nervous melody. She wore a loose sweater, her hair falling down her back, and she sank into the cushions beside him, close enough that their knees touched. Margaret followed quietly, a slower rhythm. her presence filling the space with something heavier. She chose the chair across from them, her eyes fixed on Jason as if she could see every thought racing inside him. No one spoke at first. The fire cracked. Shadows swayed against the walls. Jason wanted to leave the silence, but words refused to come. Then Claire leaned forward, her hand brushing his as she took the glass from him. Her touch lingered. She set the wine down on the table and looked at him with a softness that made his chest tighten. "You've been quiet," she said gently. "Do we frighten you?" He swallowed, his throat dry. "No, I don't understand." Margaret's voice broke the air, calm but carrying weight. "That's because we haven't told you everything." Jason's stomach knotted. He looked between them, caught between Claire's warmth and Margaret's gravity. Claire leaned closer, her eyes shimmering with something that wasn't playfulness anymore. It was longing, raw and uncovered. "We asked you here," Claire whispered, "because we didn't want to live in silence anymore. We've spent years hiding, waiting for people who never came, building lives that felt full but were empty inside. We wanted something real, someone to share ourselves with, someone who sees us not as a role, not as an obligation." Margaret nodded, her tone lower, steadier. "We're tired of pretending. We don't want to be just aunts who show up for birthdays. We want to love. We want to be loved honestly without walls." The words pressed into Jason's chest, heavy and electric. He searched their faces for a sign that it was a joke, some strange game. But there was no laughter, no teasing, only open hearts and the weight of truth. Claire touched his hand again, this time holding it. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly. "We're not asking for something you can't give. We're asking you to let this be what it is. To stay with us, not out of duty, but because you feel it too." Jason's pulse pounded in his ears. He looked at Margaret, needing clarity. She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "You feel it. Don't deny it. The closeness, the pull between us. It's here. We can all sense it. You're not imagining it, Jason." He pulled his hand back, standing abruptly. Pacing the rug like the ground itself was too unsteady. His words tumbled out in broken pieces. This isn't normal. You're my aunts. I came here thinking it was family, thinking you just wanted company." Claire rose too, stepping toward him. "And you gave us company. But Jason, look at me. Does this feel like family to you? It's the way we talk, the way we sit together, the way you look at us. It's more than that, you know it." Her nearness was unbearable, her honesty sharper than any blade. Jason's chest ached with confusion and something deeper, something he couldn't bring himself to name. Margaret stood last slower, but when she spoke, her voice was almost tender. "We are not asking you to replace anything. We are asking you to allow yourself to step into something true. Something forbidden maybe, but true." A spark popped, breaking the silence. Jason's hands shook as he pressed them against his face. He wanted to run, yet he couldn't move. Every breath pulled him deeper into the room, into their presence, into the pull he had been trying to fight since he arrived. Claire's voice broke softly, almost pleading. "Don't walk away. Don't leave us in this silence again. Just be here with us." When Jason lowered his hands, he saw both of them, Claire with eyes wet, Margaret steady but softer than he'd ever seen her. They weren't asking with words anymore. Their faces told him everything. Slowly, he sat back down, his body trembling. Claire slipped beside him again, her arm brushing his, her touch delicate but firm enough to remind him she was there. Margaret sat closer this time, not across, but beside the fire, leaning forward, her hands clasped as if in prayer. "Whatever happens after tonight," Margaret said, her voice hushed but certain, "our lives will not be the same. But maybe that's what we've needed all along, a change, a truth." Jason felt the weight of their confession settle over him like a storm. He thought of all the years lost, the distance, the hollow greetings at family tables. And now, in this house by the lake, everything had been stripped away until only honesty remained. Claire rested her hand lightly on his arm. "This is your choice. But if you stay, stay with your heart open. Not as our nephew, someone we've chosen, and who chooses us." Margaret's eyes caught his then, steady, unflinching. "You don't have to answer now, but don't deny what you feel." The fire burned low, shadows swayed, and Jason's world tilted. He sat between them, trapped not by obligation, but by desire, by the sudden realization that they had given him something he didn't know he had been searching for. Connection that was raw, messy, but real. And though fear pressed at the edges of his thoughts, he knew one thing with startling clarity. Whatever decision he made next, it would follow him for the rest of his life. The wine shimmered in the glass, the fire hissed softly, and two women sat with hearts wide open, waiting for him to step forward or turn away. Jason closed his eyes, and the world seemed to hold its breath.